At the New Jersey SBDC Network, our mission is simple: to help businesses grow and succeed. Our consulting, training, and information services make it easier for businesses to reach their potential. Whether you're currently in operation or just starting out, we have the right tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. Visit us online to get started on your path to success today.
We are expecting a few more attendees, but they should join us as we begin with the webinar. A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. My name is Takoa Bell. I am an event coordinator for the NJS BDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on behalf of Dr. Tendai Nduro, the regional director, I would like to welcome you all to our Preparing Content and Item Submission for eCommerce webinar. For those of you here that are unfamiliar with the SBDC, it stands for Small Business Development Centers. And here at the New Jersey Small Business Development Centers, we serve as the premier provider of business training and technical assistance services to establish small businesses, startups, and as well as to entrepreneurs. We are one of 12 centers in the NJSBDC network, and we service those in Essex County. Our center is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and funded through a partnership agreement between the Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Big Business Action Center. Our mission here is to help entrepreneurs as well as business owners start and grow sustainable, successful businesses through the delivery of one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. Now, these services are provided to you at no cost and are paid for by your tax dollars. If you or your business is located in Essex County, our website is www.rnsbdc.com. And on the top right-hand corner of our website, we have a button labeled Request Counseling. So clicking on that button will lead you to fill out the information you are seeking for your business. And within 24 to 48 business hours, a consultant will reach out to you for an assessment. And for those of you here that are not in Essex County, our other website, which is our headquarters, is www.njsbdc.com. And on that website, you can type in your county and it will refer you to your local SBDC office. For the benefit of everyone attending today's webinar, we will be taking questions via the chat and the Q&A feature. We do advise or request for you to use the Q&A feature because it'll help us to have all the questions and answers in one designated area. So feel free to ask and post your questions, and we will do our best to respond during or at the end of the webinar. A copy of the presentation slides, along with a video recording of this webinar, will be emailed to you within 48 to 72 business hours. So you can refer to all of this information long after the end of this webinar. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you all our presenter for today's webinar, Ahmet Akdag. Ahmet is the CEO and owner of Styremont and is an SBDC consultant here at the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark in the areas of e-commerce, self-hosted and marketplaces, BC and B2B online strategic planning, and supply chain sourcing. And now, without further ado, I will turn today's webinar over to Ahmet.
Thank you, Takoa, and good afternoon, everybody. So this webinar is going to be about e-commerce and preparing content and item submissions to give an idea about the process. So we're going to get started here. So as you can see the title, we're going to be focusing a bit more on the marketing content and the copyright aspects. This way, it'll help you get an idea of how to approach e-commerce, what kind of data you should have on hand, and some ideas and tricks that are available to putting out these content as you go through e-commerce or as you prepare for e-commerce. Because it's always beneficial to have all this product data and content on hand rather than making them as marketplaces or as you need them for your own website, or if you're doing supplier as you need them as the retailer asks. So we're going to hop in with some of the basics for e-commerce. Because e-commerce, customers can't feel the physical product themselves. Product data and the product content is vital to the success of your e-commerce and success of your products. The way you are able to present them, the content you are able to provide, and even certain keywords can make the difference between whether a customer stays on your product and puts it in the cart and checks out, or if they skip along and look at other products. So most important for most marketplaces, even your own website, is the title, and that is because the title has a search term visibility factor. It means that it's when people are searching for the product, the title is what's going to help your product show up to them based on what their search term is. So a title that is not overly long but has all the right and important words in it is vital. You want to have, the product type. You want to have size and color if possible. You want to have. Some people put brand, some don't. That's a personal choice. Is if your brand name or your company name isn't too long, you can feel free to add that as well. But anything that's important about that product, any vital feature, whatever you're trying to really pitch to them, that should be in your title. Now, because a lot of shopping also happens on mobile, some people do also take into consideration how they structure their title. You don't need to cut your title short to fit into mobile, but what you can do is you can try to see what your title looks like on mobile and then see where it cuts off, and then you can make arrangements so the important keywords show before it gets cut off on whatever platform, whether it's your own website and you're using a browser, or it's on Amazon and you're using the Amazon mobile app. So these are some considerations to take in place. Now, there are some marketplaces that have guidelines. It depends on the specific marketplace on how strict they are, and usually if you are doing a supplier level relationship where you are supplying a retailer who's doing e-commerce, for example, I'll bring up Home Depot because they're pretty strict about their guidelines on titles and content. They have very precise ways that they want you to prepare titles based on the category of the product. In those cases, obviously you do have to go along with whatever their guideline is, but that isn't as common. But it is something that can come up. And if it's your own website, obviously that's not a concern. Now, bullet points are essentially the five most important features of your product, or five short messages that you want to give about your product. It doesn't have to be technical information, though a lot of people do include that in the bullet points. Some of it is, marketing information where they will mention that it's very soft, features like that. So I say 5 points. That's usually the average. Some marketplaces might have less, some might have more, but generally you want to have five good bullet points for most of your products, or even services, because what you want to provide is, once the customer reads the title and they look down, the next thing they will usually see after the image is the bullet points. So you want to have bullet points that answer any of the questions they might have. So when they're looking at a title, and as you shop yourself too, what you will usually do is you'll look at the title, is this a product I'm looking for? Then you'll go down and look at the bullet points and then decide if there's a catch there. If any of those words are, grabbing your attention and letting you feel like this is a product that you were looking for, that's the gist of what these bullet points are for. And another thing that a lot of companies and will introduce for their products is safety notices. It'll usually just be one bullet point. Depends on the product, depends on the category. But if there's any kind of disclaimer that you think is vital to put out there when the customer is making their decision, you want to include that there. Because another thing about these content aspects is that you want to reduce any issues of having bad customer feedback, or having returns because the customer says this isn't the product expected. So the title and your bullet points are essentially your first line of defense against that kind of issue, as well as the first pitches you have with customers. Then next up is descriptions and details. These things tend to come towards the bottom of a page. Even on your own website, most templates will provide you a listing page where the additional details are underneath the actual listing. So And this is where you'll put everything else in. It can be brand information. It can be more details about the product. If it's your own website, you might be able to put in a couple more pictures down there, put in a bit more of a marketing aspect. And then the details refers to technical details. And this is where, the field is defined, because it'll be, length, width, height, weight, all that additional detail, material. If it's a product that has the backing, you put that. Anything like that, that color, that all those stuff will go into the details, and those are fixed fields because they are defined. And then images and videos, these are pretty important for e-commerce. These are pretty much what this is the only way the customer is going to see the product and know the product and try to get an understanding of it. As a result, usually 5 or 6 images are recommended, with at least one lifestyle image. Now, 5 or 6 images, if it's not a product that really has too much detail or anything like that, different angles, different zooms are fine. But if it is a product with parts and different appearances and different uses, you'll want to include those in there just as images, so the customers get an idea of the product. And what I mean by lifestyle image is basically an image of the product in use. So it'll show the product in whatever use or in whatever area that it would normally be used in. So in the case of flooring products, it would be a picture of it on the floor in a room. If we're into furniture in the room, if it's a coffee machine, it'll be a picture of the coffee machine. If you can stage it to have it pouring out the coffee into a cup, that's obviously great. Otherwise, having it in the kitchen is enough as like a basic lifestyle image. But you usually want to have some kind of image like that. Nowadays, actually, more customers are being influenced by multiple lifestyle images. Obviously, this depends on the type of product, but one is the minimum. If you do have sell a product that can be shown in different uses, that's always great. Lifestyle images tend to be more eye-catching, simply because it's showing the product in its use, rather than just a more minimalist of the product itself. Though you don't want to go overboard, because you do want the customers to be able to see the product by itself too. So usually having 1 to 3 lifestyle images is good. Anything more than that, it would have to depend on the product, and usually it starts becoming too much. Now, some marketplaces do allow videos. Some of them are still trying to get videos set up, and some of them might restrict videos to certain types of sellers. If it's your own website, obviously you can put videos as well. Videos, while it might not come up as an idea for certain products, you might say, well, my product isn't something that really makes sense in a video. It might not really do anything, or in that sense that you can put in a video and make an action. A way you can approach it is you can actually consider the video to be a presentation, like a slideshow. Your video doesn't actually have to be live action video. It can actually just be pictures with text on it, that kind of flows as a presentation in video format. And the reason for this is actually it lets, usually about a minute is fine. You don't want to go overboard, but a minute of pictures that with text on it, that provides a presentation of maybe your brand and maybe your products and maybe the assortment, or maybe it's a highlighted features, so you're essentially putting the bullet points in a video format and then providing that presentation. That can help, because customers will look at videos, if there is a video. If they're interested in the product, they'll definitely take a look at the video. And in some formats, maybe the video pops up first. And usually videos will also factor in, for example, Amazon's advertising. If you decide to get into that level of investment into your account on Amazon, I believe they are rolling out video advertising. I know they rolled it out on the supplier side for their vendor central platform. So it is something that is going to be tied into not only just putting it in for product content, but kind of advertising, because they'll be playing the video that you have for the product as advertising too, or you can provide any other video. So it has roles like that. If videos aren't really a major part of your product, though, you shouldn't really make too much of an investment in it, because like I said, right now videos are still some marketplaces still just don't have that infrastructure set up for product videos, it is something that they will all start adopting. But unfortunately, right now, it's just they're limited in the scope. Images should still be your priority as the content you need, visual content you should really invest in. Videos are, if you are able to incorporate them, that's great, but your images are what are the golden ticket for you. Now, keywords depends a lot on the marketplace, and depends a lot on your own. If it's your own website, it depends on what your SEO strategy is. But while keywords are very dependent on marketplaces, they usually do have some kind of impact. They do have some kind of factor in boosting your product visibility. The exact extent is unclear because marketplaces won't really share this information. It's usually proprietary because of their algorithms. They all recommend you put keywords, but they don't really tell you how the keywords really factor in detail, and that's just because of the way that their algorithms set up. But I recommend that any product you are creating, you should definitely have a whole bunch of keywords for it. You don't want to go overboard. With 500 different keywords that are just variations of one or two words. Doing that doesn't really work too well. Switching around, like if using 5 words and just switching them around isn't very effective, because usually the computers that do the algorithms, they usually do kind of like a broad aspect to it. So it's not exact match keywords. What it looks at is, if someone searches, let's say you do blue phone, and then you do phone blue, you're going to have two keywords there, but in reality the system will only see one, because you have the word blue and you have the word phone. The order you put it in isn't really going to make a huge difference. Obviously, the one that's put in the more proper semantic order, because that's the way the customers will be searching it, might have a bit more preference. But at the end of the day, going overboard with switching the words around isn't very effective. You want to have unique keywords, and each of those keywords, even if it's a phrase, so if it's like a 3-word long keyword, you want to make sure that you're not just switching around the words in it, because the systems really don't. Most systems don't really do it exact like that. They don't do exact phrases. They do broad based on every individual word, and then the semantic order you put it in influences it a bit, but it's not as major a factor. So when you're doing keywords, they should be unique, because you want to hit all the right keywords and the right features for that product on those marketplaces, rather than just spamming a whole bunch of text that really won't do much. And then dimensions. This kind of ties into the details part, but by dimensions, you will need to have this information on hand, because most marketplaces, obviously, when you're doing the shipping, you need to provide dimension information. And if it's a marketplace that lets you print labels, for example, Amazon or Etsy, they will use the information you give them to let you purchase a label. And with the way that shipping rates, cost, and the way they're calculated, having as exact and accurate the dimensions as possible is vital, because that will help you avoid potential. Because there are situations where being an ounce more than what a product actually is can actually put you into a separate shipping rate than what you might normally be paying, and that can be dollars in difference, and that's a huge impact on your profit margin. So you want to be as accurate as possible. If on the product physical end, whatever shipping that's the lightest and smallest you can put it into without sacrificing the shipping integrity, and reducing its chances of not being damaged. As long as you can avoid situations like that, and you can put it into something as small and light as possible, that'll also be in your best interest. But you want to avoid any kind of situation where you're damaging the product or making the damage vulnerable to the damage during the shipping process, because that will cost money if you have to start handling returns as a result of that damage. So as small and light as possible without sacrificing its protection during the shipping process, and without doing anything that will leave damages on the product. For example, there are certain products where you can roll them up safely, but if you fold them, you can make them smaller, but fold will leave creases on them, whereas you're not supposed to have creases on them, and that can increase returns from customers who are going to complain that there are creases on their product. So those are things to weigh, but you want to have this information as accurate as possible. And it also helps for all of this information here, it also helps to have a master list where you keep it. Simply because if your business starts growing and you start getting more traction, if you start hiring people or you start working with other marketplaces and you have to do all their onboarding separately, having a master list you can check into just makes things easier. I know it sounds odd mentioning this master list. Most people would assume, well, you're creating the product, you should have all this information. But the reality is that a lot of sellers jump into the sell first aspect. So they'll prepare the template for their first marketplace, but they won't really create their own master list. They'll get a template for, let's say they start with Amazon, they get a template, they fill the template out with the product as Amazon requires, and then they submit that, and then they keep that as their master list. But that's not really a good idea, because a master list shouldn't be based off of specifically what one marketplace was asking or according to the style of one marketplace. A master list should be your own internal like Excel file of product information, and it should include a lot more information than a template might ask for. And the reason for that is because that master list isn't just for adding products; it's for also having the specific product information on hand. If you ever start hiring people, or if you already have people working for you and you are going to expand your office, for example, any circumstance like that, having that master list means people will be able to look at that one master list and get the idea of the product. And if you are going to be onboarding with other marketplaces, and let's say you decide to become a supplier, the buyers might start asking more detailed information. And while you might know the product, maybe they ask for something very specific, very technical, that requires you to record it because you didn't memorize it, because it's not something that you really saw a reason to memorize at the time. You want to be able to look at a reference and provide that information quickly. So a master list is important, and a master list should not be just the information you provided to a marketplace. It should be something you created yourself on your end that you can use for your entire business. Now we're going to jump into a bit of detail of each of these aspects in content. So marketplaces will usually have some kind of character or word limits. If it's your own website, it might either be something that the template has a limit on in regards to how much it will show, or it might not have a limit and fill up the page. So that kind of depends on the template you use for your website. But when it comes to marketplaces, there will be some kind of limit. Common format, as I mentioned, is brand, design, category, type, size, color. Now this can change a bit on marketplaces because of the way they set up variations. So I put the t-shirts here, for example, because they're a pretty decent example on Amazon of what it looks like when a format is different from variation. So you can see like the third item here, men's long sleeve beefy Henley shirt. You can see it doesn't mention color. You can see it doesn't mention size. The reason for that is because this is a variation. So when the customer opens this link, they will actually see the color and size list on the listing once they open it. This is because the search results page, or the listings page that you see on Amazon, for example, and this is something that other marketplaces have as well. When you are looking at the listings, if it is a variation, the variations are considered a listing by itself. They call them a parent. A variation is also called a parent-child variation, where the child variants are the actual individual items, and the parent is the bucket for the variation. So in this case, that item's title is actually the title of the parent, and then when the customer clicks on it, then when they click on the specific child, which is the color and the sizes, then the title updates to that. So this doesn't mean that all the products have this as the title. It just means that it's a variation and the titles exist, but not in the variant form. So it's something that's a bit unique if you're creating variation. If you are not creating variations, then you would just be entering it as the way that a child would be entered, which is with the type, size, the color, and all that additional information that might be missing from here. Um, you will want to research your category if you are new and you are entering a new category. If you are new to the category, if you're new to e-commerce, you want to research how the other sellers or the top sellers are titling their product. The reason for this is not necessarily because you want to standardize it across, but because the top sellers are usually the listings that show up on the first page for a category. Customers are going to expect to see that sort of information in their titles. So if you look at the first page of a certain type of product, let's say you're selling beach balls, and you go look at you search beach balls, you look at the first page of all the sellers. The way that that is commonly titled, that is the way you want to make your titles as well. You don't have to copy them, but in some cases, because of the product, everyone has similar titles because that's just how the product is. Um, you want to keep it as similar as possible to that, just so that when the customers are searching, because with these top sellers, it means that they've been getting traction. So you're essentially just using what standard has been created for that category on that marketplace. Now, this is, of course, if that marketplace itself doesn't force you to follow certain guidelines. If they do, then, like I mentioned, you do have to follow their guidelines. But in this case, this just depends on if it's a marketplace that lets you put titles yourself. And when it comes to your own website, you can do something similar, but because it's your own website, your strategy might be a little different, because when a customer is visiting your website, all the products on there are your products in the first place. And when a customer is visiting, they'll get an idea of the products you offer. So in that case, you can build your strategy around what kind of theme or marketing style or brand approach you're going for. So you have a lot more flexibility on your own website. But when it comes to marketplaces, you can try to see what the common, and if you can make some variations on it that you think might actually work out better and you want to test it, you can do that as well. And that's always something that works out for some sellers, to experiment around with some of those styles. Now, when it comes to lifestyles, we're going to jump into the image aspect here, just for the lifestyles first. Um, Lifestyle images, well, I say 1000 by 1000 pixels. I refer to this as for all images nowadays. You do want high resolution images, and with most phones doing a lot more than this, you can easily get these kind of images. It shouldn't be an issue, um, unless for some reason the image was heavily edited down to below 1000 by 1000. Most images these days should easily pass that minimum amount, and the reason for this is because as you know, as you see on Amazon, for example, when you click on the image, it pops up and lets you zoom in. That's the logic that they go for, by having it above this amount. They want to be able to have like the image pop up. And another reason is most devices are high resolution as well, so a bad quality picture is very obvious, and that's something you just want to avoid entirely. Um, so when it comes to lifestyles, the specifics of a lifestyle image, the image should still be focused and centered. If you're looking at this image, for example, you can probably guess that it's the chairs that are being lifestyled here. There are a bunch of other stuff in there. Ideally, they might have. This isn't the most ideal image, but it gives you an idea of how you can have other stuff in a lifestyle image, but kind of clarify what the actual product is. Obviously, the title is going to guide the customer and their own shopping habits. They're obviously not going to look up a chair, see the image, and think you're not selling a chair. But a good lifestyle image will make it clear what it is, because this is a more of a mobile thing as well. But when people are looking at images, and sometimes some marketplaces let you do the lifestyle image first, being able to see the product in lifestyle and not get confused, which can happen for some customers, is helpful. So you want to have it centered, but you don't have to, crop right into it. As you can see in this image, you can have a lifestyle with the chairs, and most people will know it's a chair because the chair is centered in the image. But there are more better ways that this can be designed. But this gives you an idea of how the lifestyle affects the customer experience, because they're seeing it, especially if it's a business, for example, that's looking for the product. They might see it in the office setting and say, it might encourage them to consider the product, versus if it was an item that didn't have a lifestyle, it just had the regular images. um, it's not a major thing, but when it comes to the difference between making a sale and not making a sale, obviously having anything that can put the scale in your favor is obviously a benefit. And like I mentioned, one image is enough. But let's say this chair seller, for example, the office chair seller, also wanted to put in, maybe with the pandemic, for example, a lot of people are doing a home office, um, or their kids are studying from home on a computer. You might also include the chair in a house setting or a home office setting, to kind of encourage customers who are looking at it from that end. Like I mentioned, it's not really major impact. Obviously, it's more of a marketing approach, but anything that anything that tips the scale is a benefit. Now, when I say it can be CGI early on, what that means is that a lot of times the cheapest approach to preparing this, because when it comes to a lifestyle image, obviously because of the props and that have to go on, there can be additional costs, and you need a kind of a studio space to have it in here. What some people do is they use pictures of that location, a like a lifestyle image. Let's imagine this picture, but imagine there was no chairs; it was just the desks. What they would do is they would take their product, they would do editing to to cut out their product, just the chair, and then they would put it into this image where there were no chairs, and then they would put it in here and then do a bit more of a photo editing to kind of fit it in. It wouldn't be the most realistic image, but at a glance, it would do well enough, and it's a lot cheaper than getting the props to a studio. But one thing to look out for is, don't just use any image you find, because a lot of images are actually copyright. So you don't want to use an image that will result in you getting a cease and desist because you are using someone's copyrighted image. Even if you edited it and then put it in some your products, the image itself was originally someone's copyright. So you can look up stock images that will let you give you the rights to make edits like that. Some will charge you like a commercial fee to use it, but usually that'll be cheaper than having an actual like studio with the props set up. So you want to be careful for that. And another thing is required is, you will need that photo editing software and some experience or training with it. You can find people that can do it, usually for simple jobs like that. It'll be cheaper than, like I said, doing the photography. If you know Photoshop yourself, and you have Photoshop and you're looking for the training, technically you can get the training for that, because all you're doing is you're just cutting your product and putting it in a location, just temporarily. The goal usually here is so you have some kind of basic lifestyle image that later on, when you have the amount of funds to invest into getting some proper photography, you can do it that way. And another thing to note is that if you are in a supplier relationship, uh, the retailer might not like that you're using these digital images, and they will be able to tell, because their software will be able to tell that it's a doctored image, I would say. So you want to check in with them. um, they will be understanding if it's just a case of having something in there, and it's not egregious, like it's not very low quality, as long as it's passable. But the general idea will be they will expect you to upgrade this to an actual photography lifestyle at some point. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But if you're looking for a fast, low cost approach, you know, CGI style is a basic filler early on. It'll let you get the process started. Um, Another thing is, You might not even have to do any of this if if the manufacturer you are buying the product from, if they can provide some kind of lifestyle imagery, that's good for you. But beware that I have seen this as well. Some manufacturers themselves decide to take a shortcut and they do the CGI image as well. Either it's 3D rendering, which is very obvious, or it's what I mentioned where they Photoshop the product into a location to make it lifestyle. Um, they might give you something like that. uh, it can or cannot be helpful, depends on the quality. But if you're working with a manufacturer or supplier who can give you actual photographed lifestyle images, that will save costs on your end. Otherwise, these are the options that you have as an alternative for that. Imagery, like I mentioned, 1000 by 1000 is fine. 5 or 6 images are ideal. Uh, Items on a clear or white background are important to highlight the product itself. Uh, all your images don't have to be this way. For example, you can look at this. This is a product that was posted on Wayfair. You can see those little thumbnails on the bottom with the 6 images. You can see that only one image is actually on a clear or white background. This one some marketplaces call it the main image. Now on Wayfair, the main image is actually lifestyle, which is why the first thumbnail is actually the product in its use in what looks like a living room. And the main image, the white background image, is actually the third one. But other marketplaces require, when they say we want a main image, they will tell you that they want a main image that's on a clear or white background, and that's usually because of the way that they're structuring their listings on their page. So it depends on the marketplace that you're selling on. Some will say lifestyle is fine. Some will say no, the first image should be clear white background. Usually having at least one is fine. You don't need a lot more of the product with a clear white background. One image of the product like that is usually more than enough. And in some cases, some people just Photoshop it out of a lifestyle image. So in some cases, if the product's not too complicated, you can actually just cut it out and then make it in a white background that way. But ideally, if you are buying it from a supplier or manufacturer, they should be able to give you these images somehow. And a low cost way of doing it without Photoshop, as long as the product isn't too big, is if you put up something white behind the product that you're going to, so put the product on a table or a chair on the side where the backing doesn't show. Put it on something, and then you can put behind it either the folding cardboard with the white surface. That is decent enough to get that white background appearance. If it's small enough, you can put up white paper on the wall and then take it like that. Depends on the size of the product, but there are low cost ways of getting a white background for your product depending on the size of it, which basically just involves having some kind of white background. I wouldn't recommend a wall. The problem with most walls is that the surface usually has that texture on it, and that texture is visible when you take the photography. The white background should be a smooth texture. So I wouldn't recommend using a wall unless you have no other choice, because white wall will show that wall texture. Whereas if you were using that cardboard or the paper, the texture would be slightly visible, but because the surface of those products is a smooth surface, it won't stand out as much. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are going to be photographing it that way. But having one is more than enough. You don't have to go overboard. Other images can usually just be zoomed in images. So as you can see here, the 4th image in the thumbnail, they zoomed into the product. So you can take pictures depending on the product, depending on category selling in, but you don't have to. One background, clear white background image is more than enough for all the marketplaces pretty much. Now videos, as I mentioned, not everywhere has it, and the places that do have it, they might not allow everybody to use it. This example I gave here is a rug seller on Home Depot. Now, like I mentioned, Home Depot is a supplier only, so you have to do an application to become a supplier. And for videos, the way they do it is if you want to put up a video on Home Depot as a supplier, they charge you money per video per listing. So they want you to pay to have that access because, like I mentioned, videos take up infrastructure. They take up bandwidth on the website infrastructure. So until that issue is improved upon and resolved, a lot of places don't want all this extra. Because like this image I know personally is about 100 megabytes or so, maybe a bit less. So that's a lot bigger than a single image in terms of the amount of memory and space it takes up on the website infrastructure. So that's why images are a bit not as common as images are on the marketplaces. But you can see here that videos do get their own highlight. In fact, this product, while it has a main image, anyone opening it, usually the video will pop up in a separate section of it. So you can see here it says related videos, and it comes up. So videos have the impact. Less than a minute is common and the preferred amount. One is because you don't need to go overboard, and two is because usually a minute or less takes up the optimal amount of space. Anything more than a minute is just taking up unnecessary space. Like I mentioned, not available in every marketplace. But it is slowly evolving. But even suppliers who have it, they'll charge you money unless they do it themselves. So one thing to note, just for example here is, you can see the Home Depot logo on the bottom right of this video on the thumbnail. That's because Home Depot themselves use their own studios to take this video. This isn't something that happens very often, but if you are doing a supplier relationship with a retailer, they might offer these kind of opportunities, but only for the products that they consider best sellers. So they won't do it for all your catalog. They might only do it for one or two items if they think that item is worth that investment. So that is a potential option as well. But normally speaking, they charge money for you to put videos on. Like I mentioned, can be as simple as an animated slideshow. It doesn't even you don't even need a live action video. It can literally just be a bunch of pictures with text on it put into a video format. You can add music if you want to. You don't necessarily have to. And again, note that when it comes to any kind of visual or audio resources, copywriting does come into play. So if you are using any kind of music, you should make sure that you have the copyrights to it, or make sure that it is something that is allowed, publicly allowed for use, for commercial use. Note there is a distinction between individual use that's free for individual use and free for commercial use. Most places that offer things for free individual use, they might still request some kind of licensing fee or a payment for using it commercially. So that's also just something to keep in mind. Now we're gonna hop into bullet points. Like I said, there are often 5 short to medium highlights. What I have here on the right is a picture of a Macy's item. It'll come after the title. It'll usually be either after the image or next to the image. In most cases, it's to the right of the image, unless the format of the listing is different. But normally speaking, it's usually to the right or underneath. Customers will look here to get an idea of the product, to get a features, to look at the highlights, and to decide if it is a decision they're going to make. Whenever there's a product with a listing, as I had mentioned, title is important. They look at the title, see if it's what they're looking for. They look at the image, see if it's the product they want, and the image also gives them an idea of how they feel about the seller and how they feel about the product. Obviously, having low resolution pictures or bad quality pictures, some sellers might not trust that seller. That's just the feeling they get when they're looking. But you have the pictures, you have the title. So what do they look at next? They look at the bullet points to see what the features are, to kind of encourage them to add it to the cart or not. So the bullet points are, what are the most important things to know about the product? Thought game for this is, look at when you're preparing the listing, make your title, make your image, and now imagine that there is no title, imagine that there is no image. You have 5 bullet points to explain the product or highlight the product for somebody. What are you going to be putting in there? That's a nice thought game to put in there to kind of decide how you're going to set up your bullet points. Another thing you can do always as an option for any kind of content work is, what are the competition doing, and see what they're posting. Because most sellers will more or less post similar styles of bullet points, similar styles of content, in fact. Um, so you can take a look at that. You don't want to copy them unless you're selling a product that legitimately has those features, because technically speaking, you shouldn't be plagiarizing others' titles and bullet points and descriptions ad nauseum. You should definitely be making these unique to your product. So for example, let's use this perfume. You can obviously use top, middle, base notes because any perfume has that structure. I mean, that's pretty much how that perfume works. You can do it that way, but you shouldn't be using like you can see that um, little aspect up here, which is technically the bullet points because of the way Macy's works. But we're going to use that as an example. You shouldn't just copy their description and then just change it to whatever change it from Yves Saint Laurent to your company name, and then just put in the other information. Uh, because one, it's gonna be obvious. They're gonna know. The sellers will find out that you're using their information because it's not that hard to miss. And two is it's just not good practice to do that because you want your product to have its own I should say own pitch, its own introduction, its own identity, I would say. So this is obviously category dependent, product dependent, but you can see others to see how they have the setup for that category, but do try to kind of come up with your own identity for it, or at least don't use their key phrases, I would say. For example, if they say here, how it's right, inspired by Paris, the city of love. Um, if you just copy and paste that, eventually someone's going to notice that it's pretty much just copy paste. And even if they did it, you want to come up with a certain pitch that's a bit unique to you. If you can't come up with a pitch, you don't need to. Like I said, the most important thing for a customer isn't really those marketing pitches. It's the actual details, which is where you can see in the bullet point. Because if you are shopping for perfume and you look at these top, middle, base notes, it's giving you an idea of the scent of this product when you are doing your shopping, because obviously you can't see that in the image. And if you're looking at the title might mention some type of smell, but this bullet point details the exact nature. So it's those kind of facts. The other bullet points here, like I said, Macy's a bit different, so those aren't really regular bullet points. Those are something that it's the retailers themselves has as part of their process. Other marketplaces will be different, but normally you want 5 bullet points that have some kind of feature highlighted, and minimum 3 of them should be features, and the other 2 can be safety notes, disclaimers, cleaning instructions, maybe something about your brand, anything like that you can put it. So we're gonna hop in the description and details now. Here's a description of a product on Walmart for a television. Um, this is at the bottom of towards the bottom of the page. So like you would scroll, you would see the product, you would see the images, you would see the bullet points, then you would scroll down and you would see all this information. Description is a good place to add in more content. Some people, there might not be additional descriptor information that they can put in, so they'll just copy paste the bullet points. You're totally fine with doing that. You can use your bullet points as descriptions, either putting them in bullet point format or just putting them sentence by sentence in the regular paragraph structure. That's up to you, because the way the descriptions work, it's not super necessary to go into any excessive detail if there's no additional detail to go into. But if there is additional detail to go into, feel free to include those in your description. And you can also include some stuff about your brand and your company. As you can see, this description doesn't really go into LG's brand or LG's company details. They go into some of the technological aspects of their product, which they didn't include in the bullet points because there's a lot more than 5 here. So you can see here that this is a bit more of a technical detail breakdown. But if you don't have that information and you're saying, okay, I'm going to use my bullet points, what you can do is you can throw in a paragraph or at least 2-3 sentences about your company, and then just paste the bullet points you had used. That's fully legitimate option, as long as your description doesn't look like it was created by a robot, or it's just a copy paste of your title. Which some sellers have I've seen do, where they don't want to write a description, so they just copy their title and they put that as a description. You shouldn't really do that, and the reason it isn't really to fool the customer, because they are going to notice that the bullet point and description is the same. But when someone's scrolling through your page and they see the description section that has a bit more bulk, um, that gives a bit of a better actually a better vibe than if it was just the title itself. It so it's something to just include, something to think about. If you are in a hurry to create listings, and let's say for some reason you don't have very good bullet points set up, and you don't really have any descriptions because you just got the product, you're rushing it to the market, that wouldn't be ideal. That's not something I recommend, but it is a circumstance that pops up. So if that is your circumstance and you are pushing the item into the market as quickly as possible, then yes, you can use your title, but you should update that as soon as possible. Because right now, your goal at that moment was to get the item up and running so you can start selling. But you should be improving the content as quickly as possible. And then the technical specs, it'll change depending on the marketplace. Some call it specifications, some call it item details, some call it additional information. Naming changes, but these are fixed fields. So you can see here, resolution, manufacturer, connection time. These are all fields for that category of product. If it's a marketplace or you're being a supplier, they'll have that defined. If you are selling on your own website, you might have to define additionally. The template you use to build your e-commerce website might not have the additional details. The way it'll usually treat it, for example, on WordPress, it'll treat it as a custom attribute. So it is something you will have to add in, if you want to, of course. You don't really need to go overboard. If it's something that you think, if it's a detail you think customers should know about, feel free to include. If it's not really, you don't really need to. You can even see this on Amazon. If you look at different products in a category, some might have a whole bunch of item details because in an Amazon template, those are optional fields. They're not all required. So they might have filled out all those optional fields because they wanted to put all that information in. Whereas you might have other sellers who have the bare minimum, and that's because they only did the required columns, not the optional ones. So it depends on the marketplace, and it depends on the information you want to provide. Generally speaking, dimension, weight, and size, those kind of stuff will all more or less be required, and it's nice to have. Model number is helpful in case a customer wants to contact you with a product and you don't want to play a game of trying to explain the title and you trying to figure out which product they're talking about. Having that here is called model number. Other places call it an SKU. Having that there is reference, and some places might require you to have the barcode. It'll show it, it won't show it. Some marketplaces actually don't hide the barcodes, so you won't see them in the specs, but they'll actually be hidden in the specs. So if you do inspect element on your browser and you look through the coding on the website, you'll actually see the barcode is listed there somewhere, because it's in the specifications, but they hid it. Depends on the marketplace, and also depends on how you set it up on your website. Now, keywords. Here's an idea of how keywords come into play. This is from Amazon. As you can see, when I wrote bookshelf, I got a list of search terms. Keywords help you organically pop up when people are searching for a search term that matches your keyword in some way. The way that the Amazon algorithm works, based on observation, obviously, since that information is private and proprietary, so no one really knows except Amazon. But most people have an idea of it because the way it works has based on experimentation, has shown that let's say you have a keyword that is has the word bookshelf, has the word speaker, and has with doors. So you can see it doesn't come up here, but let's say you have a keyword that has those 4 words in it. What will happen is that Amazon, if someone searches bookshelf, those who have the word bookshelf in their keywords, along, you can have a whole bunch of different words, but if you have the word bookshelf alone, um, you'll be coming in with all the other bookshelf ones. So even if you are mainly selling a bookshelf speaker with doors, if someone searches bookshelf, you might have a chance popping up with the rest of them. The reason I say might have a chance is because when someone is that broad, Amazon looks at the rankings and to determine who's they're going to show. But then let's say they get specific. They say um, bookshelf with doors. Now, if you have bookshelf speaker with doors, and you can see here someone says bookshelf with doors, but they didn't write speaker, you might say this keyword won't come into play. But in reality, it'll actually come into play because you hit 3 of 4 words in your keyword, which will bring it up, which will potentially bring it up to the customer. Like I said, the reason for potential is rankings come into play. So it depends on all the other sellers and whoever is considered the most appropriate for the customer based on whatever Amazon's algorithms are. But this ties into where I mentioned that keywords, you should approach keywords not as matters of exact phrasing, but as having the words you need to match any of the search terms that are coming up. So you'll want to create unique and feature related keywords for your product, so you can increase the odds of your product popping up in organic searches. Um, Unfortunately, the role keywords have is slowly diminishing because with the large amount of sellers, the next thing has become placement based on advertising. In fact, Amazon has changed the way their listings work over the years to go from a very organic, heavy process that keywords benefited from, to a more advertising focused side where keywords do play, organic results do play in, but people who advertise will show up a lot more in the listing. So you'll actually see, like if you look at a listing now on Amazon, you'll actually see you'll see a couple of items on the top that's ad. You'll see some of the listing results are ad, and then you'll see ad promoted items in between organic items, because the promoted items will have that disclaimer on it saying that it is an ad or a promoted item. But you'll see a lot more of them because it's become a case where anyone investing to get onto the first page of results is going to be popping up. But while advertising is a bit of a separate topic, keywords do play into advertising as well. So obviously, because organic keywords are free, you can put in as many as you want that are relevant. Whereas if you were doing advertising, you would need to really work hard on the keywords that sales for your words, your products, rather than going overboard, because having too many keywords will mean less effective campaigns and a lot more spending. So that's a bit of a topic on advertising, unrelated to this, but it is where keywords come into play in both fields. Uh, Keywords aren't the only factor too. Listing content itself affects search results. For example, titles. Um, Bullet points and descriptions have some impact, and then keywords have some impact. So the whole package, as long as you're preparing the whole package nicely, it should increase your chances of influencing organic results. To find keywords, if you're having a hard time coming up with anything beyond what you have, Google Trends is a decent place where you can test out, see what kind of search terms are coming up, and use that. Alternative is doing what I did here with Amazon, where you write down one word and then see what are being searched. I recommend doing it if you're using Chrome, for example, do it incognito. If you are using Firefox, I think they call it incognito too, or maybe private. But use whatever browser you're using. Make sure you use their incognito or their private equivalent. And the reason for that is, as you know, cookies are a thing on all these websites. So your search habits and history will actually affect the words you're seeing. So what I did here was I actually looked this up on incognito, because if I had done bookshelf, Amazon would use the cookies it has about my shopping habits. And if you're logged in, clearing your cookies won't really affect it, because if you have an account, your account will have that data instead. So you don't want to be logged in, and you don't want to be on your regular browser. And the reason I say incognito is it's easier than clearing your cookies. If you don't want to clear it, it can be, if you're doing something somewhere else where the cookies are making things easy for you, convenient for you. You don't have to go off and clear your cookies every time you want to do this. You just use incognito or private and go into the marketplace and see what pops up with that word. So type in the word, see what comes up. Some marketplaces don't really have this feature, but stuff like Amazon has this kind of feature. Obviously, there's not a lot of keywords here, but you can literally use their search bar to help you do keyword research. So that it's a way of using something meant for something else to generate the data you need for what you're actually trying to do. Now we're going to touch upon item creation. Item creation depends on the marketplace and the supplier, retailer, or the way you have it. Well, when it's your own website, you probably want to choose whatever's convenient for you. But for marketplaces, item creation and submission, they have manual and they have templates. Manual is where you use their platform to go in and open the items one by one. Some of them might have a bulk feature, but many of them are usually one by one. And then the template version is where they give you an Excel file and then you put in all the required information and then you submit it and then they create the item on the back end. Now, common information required, regardless of whether it's manual or template, is item title, description, category, and identifier, like a UPC barcode. A lot of marketplaces are making that mandatory now. So Amazon, for example, it's in the past, it didn't. It was optional to put in now Amazon does check to make sure that your barcode is GS1 barcode. So that is something they check. Price and MSRP obviously is required. Images depends on the marketplace. If you have a link to your image somewhere, and by link it should be hosted online somewhere. If you have a WordPress, usually the WordPress media library will generate a link for every asset that's uploaded. Dropbox can work, depends on the marketplace, but images in a template version is usually a link. But what I recommend is not doing it in the template and uploading the images manually unless you have a lot of products you're adding. Then you will want to use the template with links for the images. But images, you want to have those in hand because some marketplaces do require some kind of image to actually open the item. You can't create an item without an image. It will give an error. And then product dimensions and weight, shipping dimension and weight, obviously you want to have this information as well, and it'll usually be a requirement. Now, template, there isn't really a distinction between manual and template in the information, except variations. Now, in a manual one, you can create the variations manually too. In fact, in Amazon, there's a way to create a variation and create like bulk items using that process. Though you do need to then go in and update those child variants you created. But I usually recommend using a template for variations because it's an easy way to keep track. One thing to know about templates is that they're a very handy way of creating a trail of item submissions. You can keep your templates as records, of dates that you submitted items. So it's very handy to have. I usually prefer templates on that basis alone because it creates that additional record on your end of that product. So it's very useful to have that data. So I usually recommend templates, but if it's one or two items, you don't really need to go through that entire process. So the reason I recommend variations in a template is because it's easier to organize in most cases, and some marketplaces actually require you to use a template to do a variation. They don't offer variations in the manual process. Only the bulk process with the template will let you actually create variations for your products. Just an example of some templates. You can see this is a Walmart template for clothing category. You can see here it has required, recommended, and optional. There isn't really a major difference between recommended and optional. Recommended is also optional. Reason Walmart puts the recommended is because they just want to encourage you to provide that additional information. But I don't recommend using that as a metric. Anything that isn't required is optional. And if it's optional, you need to determine whether it's data you should have in there. For example, here, model number is optional, but I recommend always having the model number filled out, and the model number will usually be the SKU, unless it's it's a certain type of product where you have a difference between the SKU and the model number. Maybe you have a model that has 3 different variant types, and each of the variant types is a SKU, but their model number is different because of the way that it's designed. Depends on the product again, but generally speaking, as you can see here, filling out the required fields is more than enough to prepare the template and then submit it to create the item. But when you have this template on hand, I recommend filling it out as much as possible. So once you submit that template, everything that can be added is added into that marketplace, that catalog. And normally in a lot of marketplaces actually let you use a template to actually make corrections to, especially if it's multiple items. It's a lot easier to use bulk updates as well through a template. Here's an example of Amazon's template. You can see here, it's a bit different. You don't see optional required, and that's because they have macros running in the Excel file. So if you were to choose a product type on the left hand side, you can see if you chose a product type, what Amazon actually does on their files is they highlight the cell borders in colors, so it becomes color coded, and that color code tells you whether a field is required or not. So it'll color code it red, which means that it's a required field that's missing data. And then when you enter the data, it'll change that cell to a green border, which will tell you that that's filled out. And then if it's a cell that isn't highlighted in any way, that's just Amazon Excel telling you that this information is optional. It's not a requirement. So on Amazon's end, they put in a macro. That's why you don't see it say anything about optional or required. You might actually get Excels from other marketplaces like that too, where it won't say that, but there might be some kind of macro running on the back end. And if you're in a supplier doing supplier relations, for example, some even go very technical. Home Depot's file, for example, has a macro that does a verification. So when you click on when you're done and you hit the verify button, the Excel macro will review the file and then let you know if there are any errors based on the data type. So those are a lot more technical, but there's different types of templates, and there's different ways they function. But in general, it lets you they give you all the information, then they tell you which one is required, and then you can fill in the optional ones as necessary. And here's a Wayfair one, just to give an idea of something that looks different. As you can see, they do have required and optional, but you can see here, because Wayfair is a hybrid model of marketplace and supplier, they use a wholesale model. So as you can see here, it's not price, it's wholesale price, which is the cost that it's going to go for Wayfair. And there is no listing price, there is full retail MSRP. But the Wayfair sets the actual price to sell the product for. MSRP is written as optional. If you are working in this with a supplier, for example, do always provide an MSRP. Don't assume that the retailer partner or the marketplace is going to know what the correct pricing should be. Obviously, they have a team on their side that does the research for this and does the data for it. But at the end of the day, you know your product better than them. And if you have been selling for a while, you know the markets. You probably do know the market better than them too. That is a circumstance that can happen. So you want to include the MSRP, so when they're doing their pricing, they're not putting anything excessively high or excessively low. You want them to make sure they're setting a price that's proper for that product. So while MSRP is showing as optional here, and it might be optional in other marketplaces and retailers, do always provide an MSRP if you are doing a wholesale model, because you're working as a supplier to a retailer or a marketplace. As I had touched on earlier, master data helps us have. Cheapest and most straightforward is Excel or Google Sheets. If you have an email that's Google Gmail that's has your custom domain, so if it's your name or info at your domain name, that means you have a Gmail with the business suite. Feel free to use your Google Sheets for that if you don't have too much data. Excel also works if you have an Excel subscription. This works. This is handy as long as you don't have too many products. This can be done. I have seen some company do it with over 1,000 products. It took some effort to put it together. They did have a team working on it of 3 people, but once you make the master data, you don't really change it in the future. You just make small tweaks. So it is doable for even large quantities, but too high quantity, for example, if you're selling a lot of products, a lot of SKUs, or you just have a lot of variation, it might be difficult. In that case, if you're scaling up from that, there are product data syndication or product information management software providers. There are online platforms that basically serve as a third-party master data or master list. And some of them actually offer opportunities to syndicate your data to marketplaces. So you'll be able to create the master data on their platform. And then if they're partnered with, let's say, Amazon and Walmart and Macy's and whatever, and let's say you put your master data in and you want to create, you've onboarded with those 3 companies, you created your account and everything, and you want to create your product, they might actually offer you an alternative to that manual or template process, because what they will do is they'll use their syndication to put the products onto that marketplace. So here are some examples, but for Syndigo, for example, what they have is they're partnered with Walmart, for example, and Home Depot. So let's say you became a Walmart supplier and a Home Depot supplier. You haven't added any products in yet, and then you use Syndigo to make a master list. What you'll be able to do is use Syndigo to submit your master list products to those marketplaces. Now, the Syndigo system will check to see if you have the necessary data, because like I said, every marketplace, every retailer has their own required and optional data. So it'll map the required information and then see if anything's missing. But the benefit of this is that instead of a template or manual, you're actually using integration to send your product data to open the products on those marketplaces in bulk. So your master list now has a utility because you're using it. But do note that these services have fees. They are a subscription as a service, so you do pay monthly fees. And it might not make sense if you don't have that many products and you're getting started. And I personally recommend that you get used to using both manual and template first, so you get an idea of how these the data process works on the marketplaces before you start hopping into using software like this to be able to make this data updates. So you can see here, as I note, Excel or Google Sheets is sufficient for most categories. And then as you scale up, you can consider these services to help simplify the process for you going forward. So now we're going to hop into the Q&A for anything regarding, item submission, product content, any kind of questions on that nature. You guys can share if you have any questions on that end. Let's see here. Oh, it's appointments. Someone will answer that. Right, yeah. So the presentation will be shared out as mentioned, but these are some key things to keep in mind when you're even if you haven't started selling yet. If you can prepare these ahead of time before you get started, it'll make it'll make the process a lot easier for you going forward, and it'll let you focus on things of growth and scaling rather than getting stuck trying to get the content you need to increase your sales. Anything that makes it easier for you to focus on growth and sales, always a plus. So preparing this information early on and doing it effectively, always a benefit to e-commerce.
Okay, thank you so much, Ahmed, for your presentation and for your time today. Do you have any questions before we move on with ending the webinar? So you will be receiving the video replay, as Ahmed said, but if you have any questions, feel free to email us. I'm going to share my screen real fast so that everyone has our contact information. Give me one moment. Okay, so if you have any questions or if you would like a one-on-one consultation with Ahmed, feel free to raise your hand at this time by clicking that button, raise hand, or you can visit our website and request that counseling. And if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email and we will direct that question over to Ahmed. Again, our one-on-one consultations are at no cost, so I do strongly advise taking advantage of that. If you're in Essex County, you will be dealing with our consultants, but if you're not in Essex County, You can still request counseling on our website and we can direct you to your local SBDC office. So Louisa, yes, you have a question? I'm not too sure, but let's continue. Oh, Louisa, are you asking about the consultations? So yes, you can make an appointment with Ahmet if you are in Essex County. If you are not, then feel free to still visit our website and request counseling, and we will refer you to your local SBDC office. Okay, great. So give me 1 second to pull up my notes here. I'll be inserting into the chat some of our upcoming webinars, including the direct link to actually request counseling, and our Eventbrite page. Hopefully everyone's seeing that now. Okay, so again, that's just a list of some of the upcoming webinars and workshops we are hosting in the next 2 weeks. And if you can, feel free to copy and paste that list there so that you have that after the webinar has completed or ended. And these webinars are only a handful of the ones that we are hosting this year. We have many other webinars. We have about 100 different webinars this year and topics ranging from finances, marketing, e-commerce, credit counseling, cybersecurity, and so much more. So again, feel free to visit our website or our Eventbrite page to register for those webinars and workshops that best fits your business needs. After the webinar has completed, in the browser, you will see a survey pop up, and that survey will help us to adjust our presentations in the future, as well as give us some information on the type of business assistance you may be needing. So if you have some time to complete that, your feedback is very much appreciated. And on that note, we will now end this webinar. I want to say thank you again to Ahmet for sharing your expertise with us, and thank you to our attendees for taking the time out to attend and participate in today's webinar. And we look forward to seeing you all at our future webinars and workshops. Have a great day, everyone.